Number 15. Rufus Gates. Just one look at Rufus Gates' mugshot tells you exactly why the internet nicknamed him Prune Head after his arrest in 2015. He was accused of robbing a child's birthday party at gunpoint at a motel in Santee, South Carolina. According to police, Gates and his accomplice, Alexander Lamar Outlaw, cornered the guests at the party and demanded their belongings. But people were more concerned with the suspect's mugshot than the actual crime itself, with countless prune and raisin jokes popping up online in reference to a collection of folds on the man's scalp. People also compared the appearance of Gates's head to the wrinkles that form on a person's fingertips when their hands get wet and pruny. The Daily Mail thinks that Gates may have a rare condition called cutis verticis gyrata, or bulldog syndrome. First mentioned during the 19th century, the condition is defined by Medscape as convoluted folds and furrows formed by an overgrowth of skin on the head. There are different versions of the condition, including one which comes with symptoms including schizophrenia, cranial deformities, and mental deficiencies. The first signs of bulldog syndrome often appear after puberty. It's most common in men, and there's no known cure. Gates pleaded guilty to second-degree burglary for what he did. After taking his age into consideration, the court sentenced him to the 5-year maximum. His appropriately named co-conspirator, Alexander Outlaw, was sentenced to 10 years. If you ask us, Gates deserves the shaming he received for ruining that poor kid's birthday. Number 14. Michael Allen Lewis. While investigating a disturbance at a motel in Kissimmee, Florida one night in 2016, Osceola County deputies met an enraged man who was covered in blood thanks to a large head wound. He seemed unbothered by the 3-inch cut and was allegedly unwilling to have a civilized conversation with officers. And while law enforcement eventually got the situation under control, they didn't find it necessary to have the man clean the blood off his face before getting his mugshot taken. According to a report, 37-year-old Michael Allen Lewis immediately reacted to deputies' attempts to talk to him that night by yelling about how his dogs were missing. He said he was in the mood to kill a fat boy nearby who he thought was staring at him. The victim, Thomas Messina, said everything started when Lewis left his room and began yelling about his dogs. Messina accused the suspect of pushing him and rubbing blood on his shirt after hitting himself in the head with a beer bottle. Lewis allegedly threatened to rip one witness's throat out and even took a swing at the bystander, who managed to duck in time to not get hit. The arrest report said that Lewis ignored a deputy's repeated commands to step back as he continued to scream and bleed. He was accused of becoming combative with the authorities and threatening to rip one of their throats out as they tried to take him into custody. The cops eventually resorted to tasering him to stop him from pulling, kicking, and jerking away. It worked, but Lewis continued to resist and banged his head against the pavement, causing even more injuries to his head and facial region. Before being booked, Lewis was taken to the hospital, where he reportedly said, "I am going to hunt all you pigs down and kill you." He was given 16 staples to the head before being charged with battery, disorderly conduct, resisting an officer with violence, and threatening a public servant. Number 13. Megan McCulloch. Most mugshots go viral for being weird or creepy, while others feature jaw-dropping attractive inmates. 27-year-old Megan McCulloch fell into this category after her 2010 arrest for a DUI charge in Zephyr Hills, Florida. McCulloch's sultry mugshot went viral about 3 years later in 2013 when it showed up on Reddit. Overnight, countless men expressed an interest in talking to her, and a few of them even proposed marriage. Many believed that she must have been an actress or a model, and one man even invited her to stay with him in Ireland and offered her a bartending job. Dozens of memes featuring her stone-cold yet seductive gaze soon made rounds online, paired with captions like "guilty of taking my breath away," "arrested for breaking and entering your heart," and "tell me what she did so I can end up in the same jail." The Daily Mail caught up with McCulloch after her mugshot took the internet by storm. She was shocked by all of the attention it received, especially since she thought it was a bad photo, considering the fact that she was very drunk and had been crying when it was taken. As it turned out, McCulloch wasn't even a model or an actress. She worked as a medical assistant and has turned her life around since her DUI. During the Daily Mail interview, she explained that her arrest happened after a night out drinking with a friend in Tampa. She said she had no plans to drive that day, but she made the decision after her friend went somewhere else with her boyfriend. Megan's mistake and the legal issues that came with it were extremely upsetting, and the attention she received from her mugshot reminded her of a closed chapter in her life that she wanted to leave in the past. She said that she received many gross messages and had to block a lot of people. While she was single at the time, McCulloch found it disappointing that most men didn't want an actual relationship. She also added that she thought it was weird for people to pursue her based on a mugshot, something she was ashamed of. Most women would agree that Megan's mugshot probably attracted lots of unwanted attention from creeps. Number 12. Joseph Augustini. Police in Denton, Texas responded to a strange call one afternoon in early 2017 after getting a report about a white man in a women's tank top running through traffic with black makeup all over his face. After a bit of searching, they located the suspect, who was later identified as 25-year-old Joseph Augustini. His face, arms, and chest were covered in a strange black substance, and he was wearing a checkered spaghetti-strap shirt and a brown knit hat. When police asked for his name, Augustini allegedly said, "I am the law. I know the law. I am the law." According to an affidavit, he then told the officers to remove their guns or else it wouldn't be a fair fight. He continued to give random rambling answers, making it clear that he was incapable of having a decently coherent conversation. At one point, Augustini pointed at a drawing of a star on his knee and told an officer that he was in his personal circle. He then repeatedly said, "I want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth." Police soon got the situation under control and took the suspect into custody on charges of non-alcoholic public intoxication and possession of drug paraphernalia. A pipe that was in his hand at the time of his arrest tested positive for meth, which explains the bizarre behavior. Even after booking Augustini into jail, authorities were unsure what the black stuff on his face and body was. The affidavit refers to it interchangeably as ink and makeup. Body cam footage from the arrest shows that he used the substance to draw a spider web on his chest and arms. While this was the first time Augustini's mugshot went viral, it wasn't his first time dealing with the law. His previous arrests include an evading arrest charge from 2011 and a criminal trespassing charge from 2012. In a previous mugshot, he seemed much more respectable. It's actually sad when you compare the two. Number 11. Alyssa Seguro Bathrick. An 18-year-old North Carolina woman who was given a nickname the Cute Mugshot Girl made headlines not just once, not twice, but more than 3 times for her gorgeous mugshots. Alyssa Seguro Bathrick enjoyed her 15 minutes of fame in 2014 when her mugshot popped up online after a drug-related arrest near Raleigh. In a since-deleted tweet, she wrote, "Surrendered myself at 7 a.m., got released at 11:30 a.m., F what you heard, and my mugshot's cute." Based on her charges and her comments, it seems as though she was accused of selling Xanax. Bathrick quickly caught the internet's attention again a few months later when an almost identical and equally eye-catching arrest photo circulated online after she was taken into custody for shoplifting. This time, she didn't offer any commentary about the charges. In 2016, Bathrick was arrested yet again for violating probation. By then, she had been arrested at least 5 different times and had a record dating back to 2012, along with multiple mugshots. And while her good looks initially gathered a horde of fans, some people suddenly found her a lot less attractive after it became clear she was a repeat offender. Number 10. Jeremy Pauley. A 40-year-old man from Cumberland County, Pennsylvania, named Jeremy Pauley, received widespread hate over both his mugshot and crimes. The self-proclaimed human blood artist and collector of oddities was accused of buying and selling illegal human body parts on the black market. His tattooed eyeball and tattoo-riddled face only add to the already disturbing nature of the situation. Pauley's first arrest happened in 2022 after police in East Pennsboro Township got a tip about body parts being bought and sold out of his house. During a search of the property, authorities reportedly discovered a skull, 3 brains, 4 hands, and buckets filled with human organs. According to court documents, Pauley purchased the body parts from a woman in Arkansas named Candace Chapman Scott, who is accused of stealing the remains from a mortuary where they were supposed to be cremated. Scott is now facing federal charges in connection to her alleged crimes. Further investigation revealed evidence that Paulie was connected to a different network of body snatchers and corpse peddlers. Over a 4-year-long period lasting from 2018 to 2022, a 55-year-old New Hampshire man named Cedric Lodge allegedly stole human remains from Harvard Medical School's anatomical gifts program, where he worked as the manager of a morgue. Similar to the Arkansas case, most of the bodies had been donated for research at this facility. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Lodge sold the body parts with the help of his wife, 63-year-old Denise Lodge. Court documents claim that he allowed some of his buyers to visit the morgue so they could pick out which body parts they wanted in person. The ill-gotten human remains were then harvested and shipped to buyers by post. Federal prosecutors believe the couple dealt mainly with 2 clients, 44-year-old Katrina McLean of Salem, Massachusetts, and 46-year-old Joshua Taylor of West Lawn, Pennsylvania. Paulie is accused of buying body parts from Cedric's accomplices and reselling them on Facebook Marketplace. He also exchanged over $100,000 with 52-year-old Matthew Lampe of East Bethel, Minnesota, who is listed as a federal defendant along with the rest of the suspects in the Harvard case, including Paulie. Paulie's advertised inventory included bones, teeth, organs, and more. According to an affidavit, he initially claimed that he bought the parts legally, but intercepted packages and other evidence suggests otherwise. He faces both state and federal charges. In June 2023, federal court documents revealed that Paulie agreed to take a plea deal. He'll plead guilty to 1 count each of conspiracy to commit interstate transportation of stolen property and interstate transportation of stolen property. According to the agreement, he'll face a maximum of 15 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, along with a fine of up to $500,000. The rest of the cases seem to be ongoing. Number 9. Christopher Queen. The political situation in America is a complete mess, and it's an extremely touchy topic for many people. But most understand that no matter how strongly they feel about something, they're still expected to follow the law and keep their emotions in check. In 2018, an Elk County, Pennsylvania man missed a memo on being civilized when he was accused of threatening election workers at a polling station in neighboring Washington County. And based on the crazy expression in his mugshot, internet users quickly concluded that he was not the type of person they'd want to be standing near while waiting in line to vote. According to law enforcement, 48-year-old Christopher Queen tried voting at the station in South Franklin Township one morning during the election season, but he wasn't registered there or anywhere else in Washington County. This gave workers no choice but to turn him away. Queen allegedly threatened to come to the station with a gun and shoot the place up, and state police were quickly alerted. Authorities provided protection to the station, while deputies tracked Queen down and took him into custody. He was charged with 1 felony count of making terroristic threats and misdemeanor disorderly conduct. A judge of elections named Cynthia Riley told the Observer reporter that Queen had tried to vote in Washington County a few months earlier during primaries. After being told he couldn't vote, he left without any trouble. This time he seemed a lot more upset. Before his initial court hearing, he told the press that it's all about voter fraud. Riley said that she'd known Queen for years and that she hoped he got help instead of a jail sentence. Her sentiments were echoed by election board clerk Joanne Zelensky, who told the media that she knew Queen struggled with mental health issues. She said that she wasn't afraid of him, but that a voter who overheard his threat was distressed by the incident. Zelensky went on to say that while this wasn't the type of thing people would have called the police about 5 years before, times had changed and it was best to stay on the side of caution. Number 8. Charles Easter. Before he garnered national attention for his mugshot back in 2016, 38-year-old Charles Easter was already well known among fellow Floridians as a traveling street performer. He often danced in fluorescent bikinis for tips and had a distinctive holler tattoo across his forehead. According to a police report, the eccentric entertainer grew disruptive while visiting a friend at a Fort Lauderdale hospital around 2 o'clock in the morning. While it's unclear what triggered the behavior, it got bad enough for someone to call the police. While being escorted out of the building, Easter allegedly told a nurse to F off. He was also accused of maliciously throwing coffee over the floor and wall while acting out in a tantrum. Easter was charged with 1 count of disorderly conduct for this. In addition to his holler tattoo, the arrest report notes that he also has a teardrop tattoo near his eye, and the words, "I bet you won't," tattooed across his back. Although a social media picture shows that it's actually on his chest. After Easter's arrest, news outlets reported that he was not a stranger to the criminal justice system. He reportedly has an extensive rap sheet in Miami-Dade County, where he'd been arrested at least 27 times before the hospital incident. His past offenses include drinking in public, panhandling, indecent exposure, and trespassing. During an interview with the Tampa Tribune several months before his mugshot went viral, Easter said that on a good day he could make about $1,000 in tips from dancing on the sidewalk. While it's unclear what he's up to nowadays, he seems happily married in photos from an Instagram account that was last active in 2021. Number 7. Ivy Moore. While responding to what at first probably seemed like a typical domestic disturbance at 3 in the morning back in August 2018, police officers in Lincoln, Nebraska quickly realized that they were dealing with something serious. They reported to the scene after 26-year-old Ivy Moore called and told 911 dispatchers that her boyfriend was refusing to get out of her apartment. Officers got there and found Moore's boyfriend with an injured hand and blood all over his shirt. The injured man told law enforcement that he and Ivy were fighting about his past relationship with another woman. He claimed that he was about to pack up his things and leave when Ivy suddenly swung at him with a 3-foot-long Japanese-style sword. The boyfriend quickly threw his hands up to guard his face from the blade and was slashed in the process. Thankfully, his injuries weren't serious enough to need hospitalization. According to police, Ivy seemed intoxicated when they spoke with her. She was arrested on suspicion of domestic assault and using a weapon to commit a felony. These are some serious allegations, yet the young woman donned a big smile in her mugshot. While only Ivy knew what was going on in her mind at the time, the internet was quick to notice that she looked unusually happy for someone who'd just been arrested. She probably stopped smiling not long after the picture was taken, when she learned that she was being held on a $7,500 bail. Number 6. William Bottoms Jr. They say a picture says 1,000 words, and that's certainly the case for a Louisiana man named William Bottoms Jr., whose series of mugshots show his face slowly filled up with tattoos as he spent his life in and out of several prisons. By the time he was charged with murder back in 2017, almost every inch of his face and neck was covered in permanent ink, including tattoos showing skull teeth and devil horns. Bottoms was only 2 months out of prison for a heroin charge when he killed 2 of his friends, 29-year-old Mohammed Hussein and 23-year-old Dedrick Williams, in a drug-induced state of paranoia while they were riding together in a car. At the time, Bottoms' girlfriend, Megan Gaylord, was driving, while Bottoms rode in the passenger seat and Williams and Hussein sat in the back of the car. They were on their way to Bottoms' parents' house after purchasing drugs when he suddenly turned to face the back seat and opened fire on the victims, shooting them both in the head several times. Megan Gaylord told investigators that there weren't any arguments or disagreements leading up to the double homicide, but she said it wasn't all that unusual for Bottoms to get paranoid and anxious around some people, especially after using meth, which he'd done prior to the shooting. At her boyfriend's order, Gaylord drove the vehicle with the bodies in it to neighboring St. Helena Parish and abandoned the car in a field. She initially denied being there during the murders, but eventually told the truth about what happened and testified against Bottoms in court. Throughout his trial for second-degree murder, Bottoms' lawyer showed a heightened concern that the jury might unfairly judge his client based on his facial tattoos. The attorney even went so far as describing Bottoms as a good dude in his closing arguments. As you can probably guess, the jury wasn't swayed. Bottoms was found guilty on 2 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms behind bars. Number 5. Crystal Mostek. Employees at a 7-Eleven in Virginia Beach were confronted with a terrifying situation one night in April 2018 when a heavily tatted woman entered the business and threatened to blow the building up. 33-year-old Crystal Mostek, who was wearing multiple facial rings and tattoos, including a line of teardrops trailing from under her eye all the way down past her mouth, walked into the store and placed a brown paper bag on the counter. Attached to it was a note saying, "Bomb, call 911." Emergency responders determined that the device was simply a smoke detector and that it posed no actual threat to anyone. But the threat alone is considered a serious crime, and Mostek was taken into custody on 1 count each of threatening to bomb and possession of a hoax device. In the meantime, her mugshot caught the attention of news outlets outside Virginia Beach, including the New York Post and the New York Daily News. Mostek had at least one previous mugshot which popped up on the busted newspaper website, but the nature of any past charges she faced is still unclear. At her arraignment for the bomb threat, she denied the charges and pleaded not guilty. During the hearing, her lawyer said he was looking into whether his client needed mental health treatment. Later on in the case, Mostek claimed she didn't remember the incident and that she was taking the wrong medication at the time. She was still found guilty and sentenced to a year in jail, followed by indefinite probation. Authorities never determined a motive for the dangerous hoax. Number 4. Sean Frederick Weatherhead. When the FBI asked for the public's help finding a man with distinctive face tattoos back in 2018, the number one question on most people's minds was how they were having trouble finding someone with such a unique appearance. In addition to having the word dork tattooed across his neck, which can be seen in his mugshot, the fugitive sports a strange V-shaped design that covers most of his forehead and extends into his receding hairline. The FBI described Weatherhead as a transient with ties in Nevada, California, and Oregon. He was accused of calling the agency's public access line in Clarksburg, West Virginia, and other FBI offices around the country over 1,000 times during a roughly 2-year period, starting in late 2015. During at least 3 of the phone calls, Weatherhead allegedly threatened to kill several people. The California Highway Patrol captured the felon in April 2018 during a routine traffic stop for expired tags in Mendocino County. According to an FBI update, Weatherhead was riding as a passenger in the car. He cooperated with authorities and was taken into custody without incident on suspicion of making interstate threats. While the outcome of the case is unclear, Bureau of Prison Records show that he is no longer being held in federal custody. Number 3. Christopher Shirley. Even heavily impaired suspects are usually coherent enough to make it through the booking process after their arrest. But one young man from Texas was so intoxicated that he fell asleep standing up while getting his mugshot taken. It happened in early 2015. Sheriff's deputies responded to a call about a man sleeping in his truck at a Walmart in Porter, Texas. They got there around 5:30 in the evening and found 20-year-old Christopher Shirley snoozing behind the wheel, apparently unaware that he had drifted off with his truck in reverse and had accidentally backed into a Honda sedan. A witness told law enforcement that they tried unsuccessfully to wake the driver up as the vehicle slowly rolled backwards through the parking lot. When the Good Samaritan was unable to get Shirley's attention, they called the police and told employees, who also tried and failed to wake Shirley up before he crashed his car. He finally woke up when deputies got to the scene, but he was far from alert, according to law enforcement, who described the young man as having slurred speech and trouble walking. After failing a field sobriety test, Shirley admitted that he was high on synthetic marijuana. Emergency responders checked him and determined that he was well enough to be taken to jail, where he dozed off in front of the mugshot camera. Shirley's mugshot went viral, making news headlines even in Great Britain. But it wouldn't have been so funny if he had simply woken up and tried to leave the Walmart parking lot. Deputies commended the witness who stepped in when they saw something was wrong. While the cops who booked Shirley into jail seemed to have no issues with him being slumped over in his mugshot photo, police in Humble, Texas were less accommodating toward another suspect in an unrelated incident 3 years prior. After having too much to drink during a drink special at a local pub one night back in 2012, a man named Sean Payne was unable to hold his head up while being booked on a public intoxication charge. Staff members members were happy to hold his head up for him to get a proper mugshot. Based on the seemingly terrified expression on Payne's face, it's probably safe to assume that he wasn't expecting the help. Number 2. Michelle Warrow. In August 2014, a homeowner in Leonardtown, Maryland, accused his daughter-in-law, 41-year-old Michelle Warrow, of throwing bricks through his windows. Warrow allegedly broke 9 different windows, causing about $7,000 in damages. She was booked on 3 counts of reckless endangerment and 2 counts of property destruction. According to the St. Mary's County Sheriff's blog, Warrow got angry at relatives before going off on her tantrum. People inside the house at the time claimed they had to run from room to room to avoid getting hit by incoming bricks. Warrow crossed her eyes and smiled brightly for her mugshot, which garnered attention from news agencies across the U.S. and earned her a nomination for Illinois-based radio station WXLP's Mugshot of the Year award. The photo quickly went viral when it was used in a fake story about a woman allegedly training squirrels to attack her ex-lover. She made headlines again 3 years later in December 2017, when she was accused of violating probation on a second-degree assault charge. Warrow looked considerably less happy in her new mugshot. The repeat offender also looks miserable in another mugshot she has on record from a past arrest. In 2018, Warrow was accused of smashing the glass doors of 2 stores at a shopping center. According to court papers, her husband called 911 and said his wife was going berserk. Responding officers observed damage to the doors of both a Chinese restaurant and a comic book shop, which was apparently caused by a shopping cart. A charging document said that the cart was still stuck in the doors when police arrived. After being evaluated at a hospital, Warrow was charged with property destruction. Warrow was in the news yet again a few years ago in 2020 when she failed to show up in court on a malicious property destruction charge. The Southern Maryland Chronicle featured yet another of her many mugshots in its report over the case. Later that year, authorities appealed to the public for information on her whereabouts after she was reported missing. She was located 2 months later. Some say that Warrow had issues and that it wasn't strange for her to suddenly take off. Hopefully, she was able to get the help she needed. Number 1. Christopher Ray Woods. An Alabama man's plans to go to the Hangout Music Fest in Gulf Shores were cut short in May 2014 when he got busted for trying to enter the concert with weed. Instead of rocking out and having a good time with his friends, 29-year-old Christopher Ray Woods was booked into the Baldwin County Jail on 1 count of possession of marijuana and 1 count of possession of a controlled substance. A sheriff spokesperson told AL.com that the suspect gave off a strong marijuana smell at the festival's entrance. He consented to a search and was caught with weed and 4 tablets of MDMA or Molly. In his mugshot, Woods sported a thick red beard and an equally scruffy fur vest, earning him widespread internet fame as news outlets across the country reported on the story. While the details of his alleged crime were mundane, people were dying to know why he was wearing what the New York Daily News described as Neanderthal-style garb and what other sources referred to simply as a caveman outfit. Woods bonded out of jail for $6,000 but never responded to the public's interest about his outfit.
Nine. Misty Lohman. In 2019, a series of mugshots documenting a 40-year-old Kentucky woman's descent into methamphetamine addiction went viral. But the pictures only told one side of the story. According to Misty Lohman, who came forward and shared her story in 2020 after getting sober. The Bowling Green resident's addictions spiraled out of control after losing several close family members. Around the same time, Misty was diagnosed with lupus, bone cancer, and a condition called scleroderma, which is characterized by the hardening of the skin. And while her drug use affected her appearance, her ailing health also played a role. She lost her hair, her teeth began falling out, she became gaunt from weight loss, and most people thought her drug use was entirely responsible for her concerning transformation. Misty later told local station WBKO that she didn't think she had long to live, and that her original plan was to get high until she died. She was homeless, plagued by depression, and was in and out of jail at least 15 times. as she continued turning to drugs to cope with her struggles. During one of her low points, Lohman allegedly showed up for a court hearing high on meth and was arrested for having a bag of the suspected drug in her possession. At the urging of her children, Misty eventually turned to religion and found the strength to get sober. She has reportedly been sober for 3 years, is no longer homeless, and is reportedly enjoying her new drug-free lifestyle. 8. Shauna Hillsman. When a New Jersey woman named Shauna Hillsman was busted for allegedly breaking into cars in early 2019, she stared straight at the camera and proudly flashed both her middle fingers in her mugshot. Hillman was accused of targeting multiple vehicles during a spree of car burglaries and was reportedly captured on camera trying to break into at least one vehicle. According to the Spotswood Police, arresting officers found a screwdriver, hammer, and a flashlight in her possession during her arrest. She was charged with criminal trespass, burglary, and possession of burglary tools. About a year and a half later, Hillsman was arrested for another alleged string of burglaries in Monroe Township. Bust came during a surveillance operation that police carried out following a spike in car break-ins. According to a police report, officers watched as Hillsman parked her car along a street during the early morning hours and exited the vehicle wearing gloves and all-black clothing. Law enforcement made their presence known while the suspect was in the middle of trying to break into a pickup truck in someone's driveway. Hillsman was apprehended after a short foot chase and hit with another handful of burglary-related charges. But it's unclear whether she gave the mugshot camera a two-finger salute this time around. 7. Reginald Kinser. One of America's largest retirement communities, known as the Villages, can be found northwest of Orlando in central Florida. Perhaps not surprisingly, this 55 and up community has a high demand for drugs that are meant to improve one's performance in the bedroom. A resident named Reginald Kinser, 77 years old, allegedly tried to capitalize on this niche market by illegally peddling off-brand medications in October 2023. But he ended up getting busted by federal authorities before he could move the estimated $1,800 worth of product that was found in his house. The Department of Justice is accusing Kinser of having the drugs shipped to his residence from out of state with plans to sell them locally and to customers outside Florida. If convicted as charged, he could face up to a year in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. Didn't stop him from flashing a wide grin for his mugshot, which looked almost as if he was thrilled to be in custody. At the time of his arrest, Kinser was serving a 3-year probation sentence for a previous possession charge from 2020, when he was caught with MDMA, psychedelic mushrooms, and marijuana. His neighbors are reportedly disappointed about his more recent arrest, and even more so about the seizure of his inventory. In a brief interview with local station WESH2, he said that the authorities are trying to do the right thing, and I'm trying to do the right thing too. 6. Christina Pasqualetto. It's rare for anyone to smile in their mugshot, let alone when they're injured or arrested on serious charges. But 62-year-old Christina Pasqualetto did just that in September 2023, when she flashed a large grin for the camera despite having 2 black eyes and facing an attempted murder charge. Pasqualetto was arrested in Yavapai County, Arizona, after a last-ditch attempt to save her marriage went terribly wrong. She drove 2 hours from Gilbert to her 80-year-old estranged husband John's home in Prescott in hopes of talking him out of a divorce. Christina arrived at the residence around midnight, and it wasn't long before she and John began to argue. According to police, Pasqualetto shot her husband in the wrist while he was laying in bed, after he made it clear that he wanted a divorce and wasn't willing to negotiate. John Pasqualetto told investigators that he managed to knock the gun out of Christina's hand, and that he struck her several times in self-defense. Thankfully, his injuries were non-life-threatening. He also mentioned that he had previously changed the locks on his home, but that Christina had somehow managed to continue finding her way inside. Just a week prior, John had accused his soon-to-be ex-wife of breaking into his house and forging a check for $10,000. In addition to being charged with attempted first-degree murder, Christina is facing aggravated assault, forgery, and theft charges. 5. James Gina III. In August 2023, a heavily tattooed murder suspect from Las Vegas went viral for his unusual artwork, which included a pair of glasses inked onto his face and a set of horns on top of his shaved head. 50-year-old James Gina III was arrested after police found his girlfriend, Selena Rebholz, dead with 12 gunshot wounds. Witnesses reported to officers that they had overheard Gina and Rebholz arguing earlier that day. One person described Gina as a short-tempered meth user and said that they heard him threatening to kill his mother when she tried to intervene in the argument. According to police, Gina kept his girlfriend's body in the attic for 2 days. He allegedly planned to rent a car to move it with because he didn't want the odor of decomposition to infiltrate his own car, but was arrested before he could follow through. Gina was charged with 1 count of open murder with a deadly weapon, along with a gun-related count. A review board will decide whether to pursue the death penalty. 4. Amber Shuren Rusnak. 25-year-old Amber Shuren Rusnak was all smiles while being booked and processed into custody in Brevard County, Florida, on suspicion of aggravated battery and carjacking. She was arrested in October 2023 for allegedly beating her own mother, stealing her car, and running her over with it. A neighbor called 911 as the chaos unfolded in front of the victim's home in Cocoa. By the time officers arrived at the scene, Shuren Rusnak had fled. Her mother was rushed to the hospital in critical condition while law enforcement searched for the rampaging young woman, who was reportedly caught trying to hide on foot after ditching the stolen car. Authorities declined to go into detail about what Shuren Rusnak and her mom were arguing about, but by then, the woman's run-ins with the cops had basically become business as usual. It was her 4th arrest of 2023 alone, and her 10th in 5 years. Her previous charges include domestic battery, drug possession, and prostitution. She's being held on a 7-figure bond while awaiting the next steps in her current case. 3. Cole Carini. In mid-2020, a 23-year-old Virginia man named Cole Carini entered a health clinic with 1 hand blown off and several fingers missing from his other hand. His face and neck were covered in shrapnel wounds. Carini claimed that he had gotten into a lawnmower accident, but law enforcement was quick to notice that his injuries were more consistent with an explosion. During a search of the young man's home, federal agents noticed that the grass hadn't been cut recently. They also found a large amount of a chemical called triacetone triperoxide, which is a common ingredient of homemade explosives, and other materials for building pipe bombs, along with a trail of blood and chunks of flesh in the room where the explosion occurred. At the time, Carini was on probation for previous explosive-related charges. Even after being confronted with a damning pile of evidence in his more recent case, he stubbornly stuck to his story, insisting that he had overturned his lawnmower while cutting his grass. He was charged with multiple crimes, including lying to federal agents. Further investigation turned up a trove of disturbing writings detailing Carini's dark thoughts. He was a self-described incel, despite having a steady girlfriend of 2 years, and he allegedly idolized mass shooter Elliot Rodger, a fellow involuntary celibate who murdered 6 people in 2014. Carini also wrote about ways that he thought the 2013 Boston Marathon bombers could have inflicted more damage, and fantasized about killing hot cheerleaders. In early 2023, he pleaded guilty to 1 count of possessing and manufacturing an unregistered explosive device. He was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison, and he'll spend the rest of his life living with his missing hand and fingers. 2. Sandra Lynn Henson. 56-year-old Sandra Lynn Henson looks more like a prim and proper middle-class housewife than a typical inmate, which is why she seemed wildly out of place in a mugshot that circulated in 2023. But the Mississippi native is no stranger to crime. In fact, she's a repeat offender who allegedly uses her unassuming appearance to her advantage. by crashing weddings and stealing gifts from newlywed couples. Henson's first conviction for her unusual crime of choice came in 2017. She was put on probation, but it failed to stop her from striking again in 2019, when she was arrested for stealing from weddings in northern Alabama. While she only faced charges in connection with 2 thefts, authorities claimed that she had been linked to thefts at 9 different weddings throughout the state, all while she was still on probation for her past crimes. Victims from Tennessee and Mississippi also came forward with allegations against Henson, telling police that they saw her taking money and gift envelopes out of people's purses inside changing rooms during receptions. Henson was arrested several more times over a 5-year period, landing her a 5-year prison sentence in Mississippi for burglary and grand larceny. She was scheduled to remain behind bars until 2025, but was paroled early. Her most recent arrest for petty larceny, trespassing, and disturbing the peace came in September 2023. The serial thief was already wanted in Alabama when she was nabbed for allegedly stealing from a wedding in Mississippi. Newlywed Lexi Loden Butler told NBC News that Henson stole $200 out of someone's purse and then helped herself to a piece of wedding cake. She gave the money back after people realized that she didn't belong at the event. The bride's sister said that she went through Henson's purse and found a handwritten list containing the locations of at least 7 other weddings. Despite Henson begging the family not to call the police, they did anyway. When the bride found out what happened, she was initially worried that Henson was homeless or hungry. But all sympathy went out the window when people began Googling the woman's name and saw that she had turned wedding crashing into a literal lifestyle. She's currently out on bond pending the outcome of her case. 1. Miguel Gonzalez Rosales. Shortly after Easter in 2023, a 36-year-old murder suspect from North Carolina went viral for his demonic-looking mugshot, which featured a stone-cold glare and showed his face covered in bloody scratches. 36-year-old Miguel Gonzalez Rosales stands accused of killing his neighbor, 35-year-old Laura Miller, who was found mutilated beyond recognition at her apartment in East Charlotte. The murderer had bound the victim's neck and ankles, burned her thighs, cut her tongue out, and slashed her from her neck to her belly button. Before stealing Miller's car and fleeing the scene, the killer dumped salt all over her body and surrounded it with pieces of a broken table that had been arranged in the shapes of 3 crosses. The scene was so gruesome that blood trickled out into the hallway and down to the floor below. And the apartment was scattered with human tissue and body parts, including the victim's tongue, which was found in the dining room. After noticing the blood seeping out from beneath the front door, neighbors called the police. Law enforcement arrested Gonzalez Rosales during a traffic stop shortly after the discovery of Miller's body. He was charged with murder, destroying remains, and concealing a death, and auto theft. According to police, Miller and Gonzalez Rosales knew each other, but they weren't friends. They were frequently overheard arguing by residents of their apartment building, including one person who told local station WSOC that Gonzalez Rosales had showed up at Miller's apartment with a baseball bat 3 days before her murder. The witness claimed that Gonzalez Rosales ordered Miller to open her front door and threatened to kill her. Criminology expert Mitchell McInnem told WSOC that demonic murders like this are extremely rare. One of the charges the suspect faces, destroying remains and concealing a death, is so seldom seen in North Carolina's courts that only 10 people have been charged with it in the last decade. Another expert, Charisse Costin, told the outlet that in most cases, these types of killings are not rooted in any genuine beliefs in Satanism or the occult. At the same time, it's hard not to wonder if Gonzalez Rosales was taken over by an otherworldly evil after seeing the chilling expression on his face in his mugshot. Ten.
Charles Dion McDowell. In late 2018, the Escambia County Sheriff's Office in Florida arrested 31-year-old Charles Dion McDowell on a slew of drug-related charges, including possession of meth and cocaine with intent to sell. He was also accused of possessing drug equipment and fleeing from police. The agency posted the man's crime details and mugshot on Facebook, but people were more entertained by his massive neck than by the allegations he faced. The humorous comment started immediately, with one social media user writing that McDowell should sell advertising space on his neck. Another commentator joked about the suspect being up to his neck in charges. There was also a comment telling people to leave the man alone, because next time it could be you. McDowell's mugshot was shared over 250,000 times within a week of his arrest. Then he was arrested again in Alabama after cops laid spike strips down to disable his vehicle during a high-speed chase. He was charged with more drug offenses and driving with a revoked license. Naturally, the jokes about his neck continued. The unexpected attention created opportunities for McDowell, including talks about a possible MMA or boxing appearance. He also became Instagram famous. Trouble found McDowell again in early 2019, when his bond in Florida was revoked due to his Alabama charges. His stardom was short-lived, and he seems to have remained mostly out of the spotlight since then. 9. Michelle Allen. In late 2008, a mugshot of a woman in a cow costume went viral. It was strange to begin with, but what made it even weirder was the fact that it wasn't even Halloween. The arrest happened over a month before Halloween, when police in Middletown, Ohio, responded to complaints about a woman in a cow costume blocking traffic. They arrived to find the familiar face of Michelle Allen, who'd been arrested nearly 50 times before, according to Major Mark Hoffman. In addition to obstructing traffic, Allen allegedly chased children and urinated on someone's porch. The police report stated that she smelled strongly of alcohol and threatened the arresting officer. As a result, Allen was charged with disorderly conduct. Hoffman told local station Fox 19 that when she appeared at her arraignment hearing, she also challenged people to suck her udders. Police later learned that Allen was wearing the cow costume as part of a promotional job for a local haunted trail, and that an employee came by to pick up the cow mask. However, they reportedly didn't get the rest of the costume back because Allen refused to remove it during her 30-day jail stay. 8. Matthew McNally and Joey Miller. After receiving a call about two men with painted faces robbing an apartment in 2009, police in Carroll, Iowa, went out looking for the culprits. Just a few blocks away from the crime scene, they pulled over a vehicle matching a witness's description of the thieves' getaway car. The officers were shocked to see that both the driver and passenger's faces were covered in permanent marker. Cops are used to encountering unusual sights and people, but this was the first of its kind for the responding officers. Police Chief Jeff Kaler seemed utterly baffled, telling CNN that he'd never heard of someone using Sharpies to alter their appearance. The poorly disguised suspects were identified as 23-year-old Matthew McNally and 20-year-old Joey Miller. Detectives theorized that they targeted the home they were accused of burglarizing because one of the men suspected his girlfriend of cheating on him with the man who lived there. Kayla said that alcohol was thought to be involved and that the attempted break-in may have been an impulsive drunk decision in hopes of scaring the resident. The judge overseeing the case ultimately dropped the charges against McNally and Miller due to a lack of evidence. In all fairness, the men were unarmed when the police pulled them over. There were no signs of them actually entering the intended victim's apartment, and nobody was injured. The biggest disappointment to the outcome is the fact that we'll never know why they scribbled on their faces with permanent markers. 7. Kevin Gibson. On April 20th, 2016, Miami Beach police questioned a man who was spotted drinking a Heineken beer in public. Officers searched him and found 70 grams of marijuana packed into small bags, presumably in preparation for customers celebrating 420. 59-year-old Kevin Gibson was charged with drinking in public, possession, and intent to sell, and subsequently spent the rest of the stoner holiday in jail. Many wondered why he was sporting a literal half-beard in his mugshot, as if he'd been interrupted in the middle of shaving. A little over a year after Gibson first went viral, he was arrested again in 2017. This time he faced felony narcotics charges, but he had a long rap sheet dating back to before his beard caught nationwide attention. His lengthy list of convictions includes burglary, robbery, grand theft, kidnapping, disorderly intoxication, battery, trespassing, loitering, and dealing cocaine and marijuana. A booking photo from when Gibson was incarcerated between the two more recent arrests shows that he gave up his unusual facial hair while in the custody of the Florida Department of Corrections. Nobody seems to know the story behind his wild look, but he sported the half-beard in more than one mugshot, indicating that he must prefer it for some reason. 6. James Miller. While out on patrol in the early morning hours after Halloween night in 2009, police in Oxford, Ohio spotted a vehicle driving the wrong way on a one-way street. They pulled the driver over and found a young man dressed as a breathalyzer machine who had an open can of Bud Light in his center console. In an ironic twist, he performed poorly on sobriety tests, and his blood alcohol level measured at 0.158, nearly twice the state's legal limit for driving. According to an arrest report, the officers also found what was left of a case of beer in the passenger seat and the trunk. 18-year-old James Miller was charged with underage drinking, DUI, open container, and a one-way street violation. He was booked for the offenses and was later released to his girlfriend. His mugshot shows his appropriately themed costume, which displayed 3 levels of sobriety: boring, life of the party, and totally sober. It also had a cleverly placed plastic tube with instructions that read, "Blow here." 5. James Feeblecorn. After seeing a man doing donuts in the main street of their small town in 2015, concerned residents in Randolph, New York called the police. 59-year-old James Feeblecorn was charged with DUI and several other offenses, but was released to a sober third party. The local press published news of his arrest along with the mugshot of Feeblecorn with an amused grin on his face. History repeated itself the very next day, when neighbors reported seeing the suspect doing donuts in his front yard. Feeblecorn told officers that he was trying to get rid of the grass in his front yard and was once again arrested, this time on a 4th-degree mischief charge. Instead of releasing him, the judge imposed bail and Feeblecorn was taken to jail. The local media once again published his booking photo, which shows an even bigger smile on his face. News stations and journalists outside the region started picking up on the story, with one blogger describing Feeblecorn as the Homer Simpson of drunk driving. 3 weeks later, he was in trouble yet again and was charged with violating an order of protection, according to WIVB. And, for a third time, Feeblecorn grinned for the camera in a situation where smiling is the last thing on most people's minds. 4. Robert Edward Burt. In Somerset County, Maine, 19-year-old Robert Edward Burt was ordered to serve 2 days behind bars for an operating under the influence charge in 2014. The young man had bailed himself out after his initial arrest months earlier, but the court ultimately determined that his debt to society included 48 hours in jail. When Burt showed up to do his time, he wore an orange t-shirt with his mugshot from his previous arrest on the front. The new photo that was taken as he was booked into jail will forever feature his old mugshot. Beneath the picture, his shirt bore the words Family Reunion 8/8-8-10-2014, suggesting that he may have had the chance to catch up with some relatives during his brief stint. Burt's clever display earned him a lot of attention on the internet. Luckily, he hasn't appeared in the news for any arrests since then, indicating that he's avoided adding a third mugshot to his collection. 3. Adam Roberts. It might be a bad idea to cover your face in tattoos if you're going to commit crimes, but Adam Roberts did exactly that before he became a suspect in a burglary case in 2013. The 24-year-old was accused of robbing 28 storage units by the police in his hometown of Godfrey, Illinois. The missing property included electronics, video game equipment, TVs, a refrigerator, fishing gear, paintings, antique furniture, and a sewing machine. Law enforcement released the suspect's mugshots in hopes that members of the public would remember buying things from him, which would help tie him to the stolen items. Commenting on Robert's distinctive skull tattoo covering most of his face, Madison County Sheriff's Captain Mike Dixon told the St. Louis Post-Dispatch that the unique ink was the oddest thing he'd seen in more than 20 years of working law enforcement. Roberts was charged with 3 counts of felony burglary in connection with the thefts. However, it's unclear whether anyone came forward with information about the crimes. 2. Sean Paul Melanakos. Police in Odessa, Texas responded to the scene of a crime in 2018 when they received a complaint about a man stealing from a thrift store. A customer had confronted 36-year-old Sean Paul Melanakos after noticing him trying to leave without paying for the merchandise he was carrying. Melanakos allegedly reacted by picking up a large rock and throwing it at the man. Fearing for his life, the customer pulled out a gun and fired one round, but luckily nobody was hurt. The civilian and his friend then chased Melanakos down and restrained him until the police arrived. According to the arrest report, the suspect initially gave a false name and birth date to responding officers. However, this wasn't his first brush with the law, and they eventually figured out who he really was. They also discovered that he had an arrest warrant for a parole violation and found methamphetamine in his possession. Following the shoplifting incident, he was charged with robbery, parole violation, possession of a controlled substance, and failure to identify. Most people aren't very happy when they get arrested, but Melanakos went viral for having an ecstatic open-mouthed grin in his mugshot. For reasons that nobody ever figured out, he looks genuinely happy in the photo. 1. Sarah Seawright. In 2015, 24-year-old Sarah Seawright became the latest person to earn the nickname Prison Bae for their attractive mugshots in recent years. She was arrested in Little Rock, Arkansas for failing to appear in court on a warrant for careless driving and driving without insurance. In her booking photo, the young woman looks more like she's about to go on a date rather than a holding center. Luckily, she cleared up her legal issues and was a free woman once again after agreeing to pay several $100s in fines for her original charges. Seawright's failure to appear charge was dismissed. However, these weren't her only brushes with the law. In 2012, she and a young man were arrested for armed robbery. The defendants were accused of pulling up to an acquaintance in a Target parking lot and offering him a ride, then driving behind the store and robbing him at gunpoint. For her role in the incident, Seawright pleaded guilty to 1 felony in exchange for getting the rest of her charges dropped and received 5 years of probation. Unfortunately, she's landed back in hot water with the law several times since her mugshot first launched her to fame. Seawright was arrested and extradited to Texas in 2021 for charges that law enforcement declined to disclose publicly, although it appears as though she was arrested again in 2022.